Okay, we're going to use what's called a bump mold to make our gargoyle. To make our gargoyle, we are going to just use this, and we don't want the clay to stick to this, and clay will stick to plastic and not come off. The first thing you need to do is get a paper towel and wrap the end of the paper towel into the bowl, therefore wrapping your bump around in paper towel. So see how I've covered my entire bump mold in paper towel. Then I'm going to put it on our workstation, and it's a bump. Now you're going to get a slab of clay, and the first thing we need to do is we need to roll it into a ball, and you just do that by squishing it in your hands, rolling it around in your hands. And it doesn't need to be a perfect ball, like that'll do. Then we're going to make a pinch pot. Now, to make a pinch pot, you just push it down, take your thumb, you go thumbs up, thumbs down, push in. Now, if it splits like that, that's okay. Just push the clay back together. And what you do is you just take your thumb and your fingers and you push, you pinch like this. And you just pinch it together, pinch it around. Now if it splits like that, just push it back together, okay? You're stronger than this clay. It's no big deal. Don't let the clay push you around. And then you just turn your pot around and you keep pinching in it. And if it keeps splitting, push it back together, rub it together so there's no crack left. So I've got a big crack there. I'm just going to rub that together using the other side of my hand as support. And I'm just going to be pinching it between my fingers and my thumb, around and around, like that, until it's big enough for my bump mold to fit in there. I'm actually going to make it a little bit bigger, like this. See how I'm just pushing those cracks back together, those little splits, just push and rub it together like that, okay? Alright, now this is just going to be the face of our gargoyle. If you want your gargoyle to be smoothed out, just take your finger and smooth it out. You can also take your sponge, squeeze out your sponge so there's not a whole lot of water on it. And you can smooth out with a little bit of water, and your sponge will smooth it out like that. And then you can smooth it out with your thumb really easily. Now that we have the basic head of our gargoyle, and remember we're just making the heads of our gargoyles, we're going to add the features. So you're just going to get some extra clay from where we've got the clay, and you're just going to start adding some features like the eyes and the mouth. If you want horns, ears, whatever you'd like. Now, for the eyes, one thing that you can do is you can take your thumb or your finger and you can just push in an eye socket. So I'm just going to take my pinky there. I'm just going to push in an eye socket. I'm going to go in different directions. Or you could take the back of a colored pencil and do this too. Then I'm going to roll some eyeballs. There's my eyeball. Now if I just stick it in there, it looks pretty good, but it's just going to fall right out. We need to glue clay together. Now to glue clay together, what we do is we rough up the surface and we add water. And what that shows, let me show you a metaphor for that. If you put your hands together like this, it's real easy for them to come apart. That's like clay on clay without any glue. If you rough up the surface and the surfaces come together with water, it's not easy for your hands to come apart. This is a roughed up surface. This is not a roughed up surface. So make sure you rough up your surface on both sides. You have to do both sides. So just like with your hands, it doesn't do you any good to rough up a surface like this. Okay? So you got to rough up both surfaces like that. And I'm going to put my eyeball in there. Alright. See how that's starting to come together a little bit? Anytime you want to put two pieces of clay together, you have to rough up both surfaces with a wet, rough sponge. So you need to get that clay wet, because it's that wet clay that acts like the glue. The reason why I add eye sockets is because the eyes fit in there a little bit better when there's some sockets. And then you can even use a pencil as a tool. I'm going to have some little pupils there. Alright, so there's the start of my gargoyle. I'm going to have a mouth, and so I'm just going to get some more clay. You can do the mouth just about any way you want. I'm going to make a big fat coil for my mouth. I'm going to check and see if that's how big I want it. I'll make it a little bit smaller. Make it the basic shape that I want. Alright. Rough up the surface. You see how I've got that little crack there? I don't want that there, so I'm going to go ahead and smooth that out right now. And I need to rough up that surface again. You see how the surface is rough? And I rough up both surfaces. Now that does not look very scary. I'm going to take my pencil. I'm going to open up his mouth. Still doesn't look very scary. I'm going to take this tool right here. I'm going to open up his mouth a little bit. And I'm going to pinch his lip. And I think I want a big ugly tongue sticking out. I'm going to get some more clay. I think it needs to be a pointy tongue. Ooh, maybe I'll make it a forked tongue. Rough up both surfaces. Surface that I want the tongue to lay on. And the inside of the mouth. It's starting to look pretty gruesome. And then I think I'm going to take my fork and I'm going to add some teeth to that. Some teeth texture. It's got lots of gruesome little teeth. Those are like little shark teeth there. So I'm just making those teeth textures. There we go. Alright, that's starting to look a little gruesome. And then maybe I want some horns. So I'm going to make some horn shapes. I want them to be curved horns. Now don't make anything thinner than your pinky, because if it's thinner than your pinky, it'll break. It'll break off too easily. It's just too thin and too breakable when the clay is so fragile. So I've got this horn. It's going to twist up like this, I think. So see how I kind of laid that down first to experiment before gluing it on? Another thing you can do is once you glue it on, you can smear, or you can push it out so that you don't see the seam. So I made that seam just disappear. I'm going to make that nice and pointy. Alright, that is starting to look pretty ferocious there. It almost looks like fish lips with some shark-like teeth and buggy eyes. And I think I want elephant ears. I'm going to get some more clay. I'm going to make my big elephant ears here. Now my elephant ears are pretty thin. They are thinner than my pinky, but there's so much else going on. They're thick this way. So it can be, as long as it's not smaller than your pinky in any direction. I'm going to put my elephant ear on like this, on the side here, like that. I'm giant ear. Rough up that surface, rough up this surface. Now these do need to be symmetrical, so if I put an elephant ear over here, I'm going to have to put an elephant ear over here. See how I smooth out the seam so that there's no seam showing? That way I know that thing is not going to fall off. Okay, starting to look good. And I think I want it to have a mohawk like a giraffe. Oh, yeah, that's going to look great. So I tested it out to make sure that it would fit and it would look good, and I glue it on. I rub out the seam so that the seam does not show with my finger there. And then I'm going to give it the hair texture. I'm going to do that with my fork as well. The fork is a great texture maker. I'll do it on one side, and I'm going to come over here and do it on the other side. Because my clay is still flexible, I can just move stuff out of the way. Now see how that's flopping over? So I want to come back, and it's hard for me to get my finger in there, so I can use this curve tool, and see how it curves? I use the curve tool to move the clay, push the seam, smooth the seam out. See how that seam went away? But so did my texture. So then I'm going to come back and do my texture over again. I'm not quite done yet, but I think I've given you a good idea of how to construct your gargoyle. I need to finish the other side here, the other horn, the other elephant ear. I might add some eyebrows, and of course I don't have a nose yet, which makes it look very fish-like. So I'm going to decide if I'm going to add a nose or a snout or a trunk right there. Alright, so I think you're ready to start making your gargoyles. Remember that you can add any kind of animal texture that you want to. Oh, before we go, fish texture. If you did want to add scales like fish or a lizard, you can get a marker. And if you just use half of the marker and push half the marker in, you can make fish scale or lizard scales, which is a very cool texture. See how I did that? And with this you can make hair texture, and then with your finger you can make smooth texture. So depending on what kind of animal it is, you need to add that kind of texture to the skin of your animal. Alright, now we can go make one.